your time tonight, sharing it with me. My name is Nawal Houghton and I am your divorce coach. I am a solicitor, an accredited mediator, a divorcee, and I was a stepmother for 15 years, and I also parallel parent my two boys with my ex-husband. They are 10 and 13. And as a divorce coach, I assist clients who are managing, separating, divorcing, or having challenges with particularly toxic exes, namely narcissists, and any other sort of labels that we want to sort of give toxic individuals. And I work one-on-one with my clients. I provide SOS sessions if you just want a sort of 30 minutes help, or one-on-one coaching that sort of goes on as long as you need, no minimum, maximum. I also do workshops. I'm on Instagram daily with content. So I'm sure Tam will put in my details, or I think that was at the beginning if you want to follow that. And I have a special interest with helping parents with their children when those children have a narcissistic parent, what it's like for them, how to empower them, and how to sort of manage that process. So that is me. Should we dive in? Is that what we want to do? We've got some questions this evening. You've shared them, so did you want to go for the first one? Tam, yeah. We can sort of go in.
Perfect. So, there we go, I'll just get them up. So the first one I've got then is it healthy for a child to have contact with a narcissistic parent who no longer lives in his home? Is it classed as emotional abuse on the child?
Yeah, so this is, I think, the whole notion about sort of children and narcissistic parents, we've got to be really, really careful by making sure that our feelings and impact that we've endured having dealt with a narcissistic individual doesn't sort of, I suppose, bleed into what it's like for our children. I think what we need to remember is, narcissistic or not, that child actually does love that parent. And they need to, that child needs to love both parents in order to have healthy relationships. So despite the narcissist no longer living in the home, then yes, there should be some element of contact. There can be boundaries around that. I mean, by all means, the narcissist can seek contact with the child. If there aren't any formal arrangements, they'll do this by a C100. That's just the name of the form for them going to court, asking for contact arrangements. But there is a level of contact they should have, because otherwise, if you see it from the child's perspective, that's also abandonment by a parent, which is really traumatic. And if we think about narcissism generally, there's sort of two main indicators why you might end up narcissistic or have strong narcissistic traits. I always say narcissism is like on a spectrum. So we're all slightly narcissistic, healthy narcissism, we do our hair or makeup or wear nice clothes, etc. That's all nice. It doesn't impact anybody. It's all for ourselves. But as your narcissistic traits sort of get more and more serious, where you're impacting another, you're more controlling, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, then you're sort of moving up that spectrum. So though that's that's how the narcissist is, the child, so how does someone become narcissistic? Because you've had a traumatic event in your childhood, or you've had a narcissistic parent, and so for that child not to have that sort of connection or know that that parent is out there could cause a traumatic event for them. You've got to see it really from the child's perspective, irrespective of the fact that you might strongly dislike this person. For that child, that's their mum or dad. So it's a fine balance, but it can be done with boundaries. Sorry, that was a really full answer there. But I hope whoever asked that answered it.
No, that was perfect. Thank you. The other one I've got, so it's quite a long message that came through, and I've kind of tried to pull out what the question is.
Okay.
I think, how do you deal with a parent who isn't around much? So a dad that's not involved very much and is quite intermittent in the child's life, but doesn't necessarily see anything wrong with that way of doing it.
Okay. Yeah. So again, it's that, should that child, have to be exposed, I guess, to that kind of toing and froing, and is that really fair on the child? I don't think there's a right answer for this at all. I think that any contact that the child has with that, I mean, first of all, you're not going to be able to change the other parent's mind. Okay, so don't even go anywhere near that. The notion of trying to reason with them, explain to them, you know, try and sort of reach out to any reasonableness or any moral compass, the narcissist just simply doesn't have any of that. So I suppose in that regard, I'd sort of give up with that. And what I would concentrate on is more about setting some boundaries. So again, this is a very high level answer because it would depend on all the detail, but you know, what provisions do you put in place if this person comes in to see the child? Do you put parameters around it? Do you say, look, you know, if you're going to come, it has to be consistent at certain times in the year. If not, then it shouldn't happen, in which case it then might encourage that parent to seek a C100, and then you can have something more consistent for the child. You're not going to be able to change the narcissist view about it not, you know, they not believing or thinking that it's bad to be in and out. Don't worry. I think the other part of that question was about, and the mother-in-law thinks that there's no problem with that. Don't worry about the mother-in-law. You're not going to be able to change her mind either. Just stick to the people that you know. And what you're doing there is really empowering the child to cope with that in and out. And I would seek counselling for a child like that, because that toing and froing is quite destabilising. And there's a fine line between saying absolutely no contact, because that will come back to you at some point, where if the child finds out that you've denied contact to that parent, again, remembering that, narcissistic or not, that other person is their parent. And so managing and empowering the child to cope with that toing and froing is the road that I would go down, as opposed to just blocking all contact. I think that's that one.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you. I've then got any help with mediation and trying to get a narcissist to leave the family home. Me and the children don't want him there, but don't really want to say anything.
Right. So this is a tricky one. I get this quite a lot, and not just in situations where there's a narcissistic sort of other parent or partner in the home, with or without children. Sort of very roughly speaking, again, high level, you can't kick that other person out, narcissistic or not. And the only way to do it is by something called an occupation order. And you'd have to go to court, and you'd have to apply for that. And they are really hard to get, really, really, really hard to get. And this question is often tied into the question like, if I change the locks, can I do that? Yeah, you can change the locks, but you have to give them a set of keys. So there's no point. So getting them out is really, really difficult. And the vast majority of narcissists won't leave. You know, they kind of fall into two camps, really. There are those that have potentially got a new supply, that's a new girlfriend or boyfriend, and they disappear, definitely running away from that home because they need to furnish and need to kind of grow that new supply that they've sort of clung on to. And then there are those that like to stay where they are, and they still might have a new supply, but they much prefer to stay in the family home because they have more control there. The thing that narcissists are really afraid of is you expressing any type of autonomy. You know, they don't want you acting outside of this little box that they've put you in. So by staying in the family home, they have the most control. And they also can use any other means that they have been over that long period of time that you've been with them to keep you in that box, be it coercive control, manipulation, gaslighting. And again, yes, I hear you when you say, but the children don't want him there. That also within itself is not going to manage to get him out. There would have to be, you know, to get an occupation order, there has to be an absolute threat to life. It's quite hard to sort of get them out. So, and I realise that you don't want to say anything, and even if you did say something, it's not kind of going to work anyway. But yeah, I hope that was sort of an answer there. Again, high level without knowing the intricate details, but it's a tricky one, and especially in COVID. In sort of lockdown, those that had to stay with narcissists and try and manage either midway through a divorce or right at the beginning of separation, or just kind of managing it generally, was really, really, really hard.
No, definitely, that was quite a difficult question.
Yeah, it's kind of, and that's one of the things that I get a lot of, is I just want them out. How can I get them out? And you know, again, this is one of the things that actually prevents some women and men from leaving narcissistic partners, is that notion of they'll just be there forever, they'll make it hell. And I completely hear you on that. There are ways of navigating that irrespective, and I have helped clients with that. And sometimes if you operate within the domains of kind of how I teach you to work, they often kind of give up because they can see that their coercive control and their manipulation isn't working, and they might kind of disappear, or they might stay until the last minute. Irrespective of that, I can still help you create boundaries. Boundaries is the key here. By creating those boundaries, you can protect yourself, because essentially that narcissistic abuse was possible because your boundaries were way down here. And I know you might say, no, I've got boundaries. You possibly do with others, but not with the narcissist, because if you did have boundaries, you wouldn't be in a narcissistic relationship with them. And don't worry, I didn't have boundaries either. Sometimes you kind of think, oh no, I didn't have boundaries. That's why that happened to me too. So it's very, very common.
I think then, so the next question probably leads on quite nicely. So how can I maintain the strength I know I need when I just want to totally lose it and list all the crappy things he's ever done?
Yeah. Oh God, I hear you. Like, how long are you supposed to contain all of that without wanting to just scream? Applies again, men and women. And this is one of the key things I say to my clients, actually. And something that I don't think people realise, but every single time you blurt out what you think of them, or how they're hurting you, or trying to, again, reason with them, or try and appeal to their good nature or that compass that you think that they have, they're actually gleaming loads and loads of information from you. And what you're doing, in effect, actually, is just saying, hi, so this is how you can hurt me. These are all the ways, let's describe to you all the wonderful ways that you can just keep hurting me while we're in this difficult position. So I would say to that person is find a different outlet. And that, again, is why loads of people come and talk to me, because it's not having to explain the whole concept of narcissism to somebody else, and if there's something that I get a lot from my clients is, oh God, you just get it, don't you? You just get it. I don't have to explain. You just say all the right words, and it's exactly that. Because we try and explain to those people, and if we try and think, God, I've got to explain narcissism to you and what he's like, or she's like, but if I give you small snippets, then you might look at me and think, oh, I don't really get it. So that is really difficult. But having an outlet, either through someone like me or a counsellor or a really good friend that understands it, but holding on, I guess, and not sort of blurting out to them, I think, is the answer. But that doesn't mean contain that frustration or that anger. And anger is a perfectly healthy emotion, by the way. A lot of people are scared about anger, or scared by the anger that our children express. No, anger is healthy. Anger is telling you that you just don't like something. Something is crossing a particular boundary and that it's not right. So by all means, have that anger, but just find another outlet, and just remind yourself every single time you want to just say to this person, you are this or you are that, and you are horrible and you're awful and this is what you're doing and you're ruining everyone's life. He or she actually is really content, and a bit like a toddler. Any attention is good attention, whether it be good or bad. So you've just given them a whole dose of supply. We often think that the narcissist wanting supply has to be good supply. No, even bad supply, which is like having a go at them or shouting at them, is attention and supply. So they really like that. So every time you sort of feel the need or you have the desire to do that, just direct it elsewhere, and whether that be a walk, exercise, punching into a pillow, anything, calling a friend, or just screaming somewhere else, do it, but just not in front of them.
No, I think that's really good advice. Thank you. The next one is then about kind of focused on kids as well. So what do you do when your 6-year-old increasingly says she doesn't want to spend time with her dad? He was once very emotionally abusive. He was very emotionally abusive towards me and physical once. And I guess that's quite a difficult one when your children are then saying that they
don't want to. Yeah. And again, I'm doing it from the perspective of, you knowing that you've endured a sort of, a narcissist in that relationship, and then you've got the 6-year-old that doesn't want to. And look, a lot of children do that. My children do that a lot of the time. I don't go, do I have to? Please can I not? And then they end up by coming back and having had a nice time. On a superficial basis, does that person sort of meet their emotional needs? No. Was there sort of some sort of imbalance going on perhaps during that week? Yes, but I'll sort it out with them when they're back. You've got to be really careful when someone as young as 6 doesn't want to keep sort of repeating that they don't want to go, and it kind of depends how the other parent's going to react, because what you could potentially be opening yourself up to is that parent seeking a contact arrangements order, or maybe you have one in place already, and if the child repeatedly doesn't want to go, then you could be opening yourself up to a breach. Now, I hear you when you say, but yeah, that's not me, that's them. And I think, again, this is where I really encourage an outlet. You know, I have spoken to so many professionals about this, and the key thing that we need to give our children is an outlet for speaking. Because the minute they contain any of their feelings, that's when you're causing trauma to them, actually. So having an outlet for that child, whether, and at 6, any type of sort of counselling or therapy would probably be through art rather than sort of speaking. Speaking is probably older children, but allowing maybe to uncover what it is that she doesn't like about going there, and are there any potential safeguarding issues that sort of come up, and finding the balance right between perhaps encouraging to a certain extent, but being an avenue for anything that is going on. You know, have you spoken to her? Have you said, what is it that you don't like? You know, how do you feel when you go to daddy's? All of those questions. So speaking is how you empower that child to be able to say, this is what's going on for me. And for you potentially to uncover if there's something sort of sinister or something else that's going on there, for her to be so adamant about not wanting to go. So the key answer there is be an outlet for them. If it's not you, provide an outlet for them to speak to, where they can talk about their emotions. That is so incredibly key. They need their voice. Their voice must be heard. Again, I think a lot of us will talk about maybe during our childhood or growing up, we felt that we weren't heard, and that's the lack of our emotional needs being met. And what we don't want to do is meet that, you know, sort of cause that to our own children. And they can have 2 parents, you know, one that meets their emotional needs and one that doesn't. But as long as there is that one parent that meets their emotional needs and listens to them, then that's a healthy avenue for them. There you go. Hope that was a good answer for you, whoever you are.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. I think, yeah, that's a really difficult situation to be in if your child.
Yeah, it does. It happens a lot. It's so common, so very, very common. And, you know, there's a fine balance between really understanding what the resistance is. And like I said, I get it. I personally get it all the time. Always have. The last 10 years, it's the same thing. I don't want to. I don't. You know, we're talking tears. And then they'll equally sort of come back going, oh, yeah, great, fine, thanks. You know, so it's kind of really investigating that a lot deeper. That's sort of, there's layers to that answer. There's lots of different layers.
Well, the next question is quite a big question, I guess. Like, I think, well, they all are.
Yeah.
It's quite simply, how do you co-parent with a narcissist?
So, top level answer, you can't. There's lots of information on my website about that, and there's loads of content on my Instagram. And I personally believe that you have to parallel parent. Parallel parenting, what is that? Exactly as it's described, you're going down your own sort of different routes, and there's lots of reasons for that. Co-parenting means understanding compromise. Co-parenting means respecting each other's values. Co-parenting means understanding that it's not always going to go your way, and that actually sometimes you don't have the right answer and maybe the other parent does. Coming together, agreeing on rules, coming together and agreeing on perhaps screen time, or health, food, schools, all sorts. But all of these basically require 2 individuals to work together with that sort of the best interests of the child at heart. That's not how the narcissist works. The narcissist works with, my interests are the priority and everybody else is well behind. Hence the reason you can't co-parent with them. You can try, and I'm sure that there are some areas that you can potentially agree on. But the whole notion of coming to an agreement, again, this very much depends where you are in the process with this other parent. Are you right in the middle of the divorce? I can tell you now, co-parenting would be a nightmare. Are you at the end when they potentially have another interest? Are there any other children elsewhere? That also may be hard, because it's all about what their own function is. You know, what are their primary goals? What are they trying to achieve? And if you slot in quite well with your co-parenting desires, then it works. But if it doesn't fall through with their primary goal, then it's not going to happen. So parallel parenting is you just do your own thing, and there will be conflicts. Sometimes if there is a big thing that you cannot agree on, and that can be things that involve parental responsibility from both of you, so schooling, medical care, you may need to seek a specific issue order, and that very much is what it is. You're going to court about a specific issue, and you might be disagreeing about schools, and maybe one of you wants to send them to a boarding school and you don't, or whatever, or there's a medical need, and the narcissist is absolutely adamant that it shouldn't happen, and you believe it should. So the answer is no. It's very, very, very hard to co-parent with a narcissist, and that is why the notion or the terminology of parallel parenting is used when trying to co-parent with a narcissist.
No, I think it's really interesting as well, the term like parallel parenting. It comes up quite a lot on the app, and a lot of people have either not heard of it or they don't really understand what it is. And then kind of when we explain it, a lot of people go, oh, that may be what I'm kind of doing or what I should be doing. So it's definitely, yeah, it's a really, really good one to kind of think about it in a different way than co-parenting.
There's some chat here. Do you want me to answer that chat?
Yeah, I was just about to type your Instagram in there for them, but then
thank you. Yeah. Do you want me to read it? Shall I read out the one from Joanne? Joanne says, I'm sorry, but I don't agree. I think if they know verbal abuse is occurring on a regular basis, the child will know intense this. It's an emotional abuse to the child. If their objective is to put themselves first, neglect will happen. My daughter has come home covered in sick and then sat in for an hour, sunburnt twice, and had to go to hospital on her return. I've just now decided to stop him from contacting us. And look, absolutely, you're perfectly, as I said, perfectly entitled to do that. My point is that the courts are more lenient than you realise, and it has to be an absolute, strong safeguarding issue. And I have seen instances, as you've said, like this. And the courts will not stop contact 100%. If that parent goes for contact to the C100, they will still get an element of contact. It might start in a contact centre, and if the other parent behaves, it will increase in time. You will see that. The court's priority is that a child should have contact with both parents, unless there is a strong safeguarding issue. And when there is, there are instances of alcoholism, drug abuse, and those parents still see those children. Yes, under surveilled circumstances, but as the parent goes to prove that they're well behaved, that contact will increase. So you're absolutely entitled to do whatever you want. You can absolutely decide to stop him from contacting you, and maybe he'll go away, in which case you're absolutely fine. But you must understand that he may come to you at the C100, is probably what I wanted to say there. So I hope that was useful, Joanne.
No, definitely. Thank you. And anyone, feel free, if you've got more questions or thoughts, anything, pop it into the chat as we go, whenever is absolutely fine, and we'll kind of pick them up. Another question then that had on the app was, I guess kind of what we've also been talking about how do you protect your child from cruelty? How can you make the courts recognise this behaviour is happening?
And I think the answer is very much, as I've just said to that one, it really depends on what we're talking about. Cruelty here, it depends on the definition. So if you're saying it's cruel that they are, they shout at them, and I want to protect the child, then absolutely. But the courts will just ask the parent to just behave and maybe go on a parenting course, and they won't stop contact altogether. And by all means, I'm not agreeing with the court. It is frustrating. And one of the most difficult things is trying to demonstrate the court this narcissistic personality. The thing about narcissism is, in order for you to be able to say to a court, they've got this personality disorder, and in its very definition, by its very definition, is not good for the child, you have to have them diagnosed. You can't, when I speak about clients that have narcissistic exes, I don't diagnose them. I describe the strong narcissistic traits that you're seeing, and you say that my ex, the other parent, has strong narcissistic traits. But in order for a court to listen, we're talking, you'd have to have them diagnosed. And the thing about narcissists and being diagnosed, they're incredibly manipulative. They worked an excellent trick on all of us, They can do it with mediators, lawyers, and psychiatrists. It's incredibly hard. That's why this particular personality trait is really, really difficult. And protecting our children from abuse is absolutely be on point about any alert that you might have to something about safeguarding. Get into counselling. The thing about having a child in counselling is that they will verbalise, and you then have this other person that you can go to that can demonstrate, perhaps through what the child has been drawing or talking about, that there is an issue going on that the courts will need to listen to. It'll then be investigated further. You'll get CAFCAS involved with more than just a simple Section 7 report, which is what they do when you go for a C100. It's just like a phone call or a quick visit, but you'll get more investigation about what is going on because you're so concerned about what this cruelty is. So the more help that you can get the child, the more you can back up your case, the better. And I still stand by what I say, in that we always want, and this is so depends on the age of the children as well, this answer, you know, if we're talking about 18 months old, 2 years, what I'm about to say about empowering doesn't apply yet to sort of, you know, 15, 16-year-olds, and that is more there. Giving your child that voice, that person they can speak to about what's going on for them, but also demonstrating excellent parenting skills, and by you demonstrating empathy and being able to show them in your home the rights and the wrongs, so that if a wrong is done to them, they can identify it in the other parent's house and go, well, hold on a second, that's not right, that's not okay, and I'm going to talk to someone about why that's not okay. And that's how you empower them. As much as we want to do the work for them, it's actually about empowering them, because they're going to have that parent for the rest of their lives. Yeah, that's not going to change. And yes, we've got choices about blocking that contact, but that is not necessarily the right answer. So they grow up understanding that they still love that parent, but they understand the limitations of that parent. But yeah, there's so much more to say on that, but that high level answer.
There's a question that's then come in kind of on the back of that. So yeah. How much evidence of emotional abuse is taken into account for a C100? My ex has a criminal record and a drug habit, though that's apparently fixed now. Previous alcoholism. I have photographic evidence of damage, and yeah, how much do we kind of need? What's kind of included in that?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's hard because there isn't like a one rule. And as you've just said, so you know, you've just said, right, there was alcoholism, though apparently that's fixed now. And yeah, the way that they show that that's fixed is you would implement something like a drug test, or drug and drink test, actually, alcohol test, sort of prior and after contact. That's what I would ask for. And even if you didn't ask for it, and I think I read that you would ideally just want no contact. And I understand you, that's all about wanting to so protect our children. But the courts don't necessarily see it that way. They operate from is this issue fixable? Is this person able to improve their behavior so that contact can happen? Or actually are the safeguarding issues at hand so serious that they cannot be any contact? So, you know, there are instances like that. For instance, you know, let's talk really high level and really, you know, very, very sensitive subjects, things like sexual abuse. You know, in those instances, there's case law to determine that though on the one hand, the courts say that the child must have contact with the parent, in that particular situation, it would be detrimental to the child. But it would be about you being able to produce as much evidence as possible, but bearing in mind that depending on what it is, the courts may just have a staggered approach to reintroducing that contact. And it's really hard with CAFCAS, and this is something that I help my clients with as well, because they always say to God, what do I say to CAFCAS? And I do sort of SOS sessions on this as well, because a lot of people come to me going, like, I've got CAFCAS calling me, what do I say to them? I want to explain that he or she is sort of narcissistic, and I say, don't mention that word. And it's more about highlighting the fact that you would like to co-parent with this other parent, and you have to say co-parent to the CAFCAS officer. So I'd like to co-parent. However, I find that there are certain difficulties, but you know, if these difficulties were to be dealt with, then perhaps we can see a vision. So you're trying to come from a view of working together, but highlighting those issues. At the end of the day, CAFCAS are just social workers. And I've had horrible cases for clients where the CAFCAS officer just doesn't listen, or the minute you talk about issues that you have with the other parent, they label you as the mother or the father that wants to take the child away and not have any contact, and then they end up by giving more contact. So it's a really fine balance, and again, really depends on a case-by-case basis. My answer here is incredibly high level, and that's why they often come to, clients come to me often for a specific conversation about it, because it's about getting the tone right, and there's a fine balance on it.
Perfect, thank you. I hope that helps the person that asked that one. There's another question in the chat then: how to deal with a narcissist who only wants to see your kids in order to maintain that coercive control over you. Safeguarding issues prevents any unsupervised time with them.
So safeguarding prevents any okay. So seeing, well, that's about boundaries, really. It's about again, there's not enough sort of information for me to give like a proper answer, but wanting to see the children in order to get to you is classic. It's a way of maintaining control. And a lot of narcissists actually demand 50% of time with them when they've never been involved with any parenting whatsoever. That's around money, number one. It reduces the maintenance, also increases their housing need, which means the balance in a divorce is a bit more, well, I've got a housing need, so do you, because we've got the children 50-50. It's all very wrapped up in a strategy. I always say this: a narcissist has had a strategy from the moment they met you. And the realization that that's what's been happening allows you to get your head round why they are just so clever with what they're doing. Sorry, I need to go back to the question. I veered off. Yeah, so they will do it because they want to get control over you. So though it looks like they want all this contact with the children, it's just access to you. It's be able to get back and just like, I'm here, I'm right here. Boundaries is the way. And again, depending on the specific circumstance that you've got, there are ways of creating boundaries. Even down to, for instance, a personal one for me is I never have to see my children's father. And because they're slightly older, this works. Again, it would be dependent, but there are other ways that I can give you. So the door is always open when they're coming home. When they're due back on a Sunday, the door is open for two reasons. Number one, they get to say goodbye to their father without me hovering. There's nothing more annoying than that. And also, I don't have to see the other parent, and they come in when they're ready, and then they close the door and they're like, hi, Mum. So again, it's kind of giving them independence, but also creating a boundary for me. Okay, there's no reason for me to have that particular contact. But yeah, that's kind of, without knowing real intricate details, again, a bit of a global answer.
No, I think boundaries is definitely a very good, obviously comes up time and time again, isn't it? It's something that is difficult to maintain. The next question then is one from back from the app. So how do we ensure that our children know this is not normal or acceptable behaviour without sounding like we're trying to turn on the other parent?
Yeah, it's a really fine line, isn't it? That parental alienation. Lots of different ways we can do that. So as I said before, always modelling good behaviour. I always use the same particular example. I mean, I have other ones, but I just use this because it's one of my favourites. But so in my instance, what happened with my children is we were in Spain on holiday, visiting my father. An old man fell over. And he was hurt, and he was bleeding from the forehead, and I drove and I picked him up, made sure he was okay. My boys were with me, and we drove him to his home and made sure that he was safe. The same thing in a different country, in a different location, happened with the boy's father, and his response was to laugh and to just mock the person that had fallen over, because there's no empathy there. And what my children were able to do was identify that particular behavior was bad, but they did that on their own, without any interference by me. And that's the key. Again, it's all about giving your children that empowerment to enable them to identify that particular behavior is not the right behavior, because you are modeling the right behavior. It's the same way in school. How do you teach them that bullying is bad? Because you talk to them, you show them that if there was any bullying between their siblings, that you would come in and demonstrate, well, that's unkind, that's not the right thing to do. That's how you do it, you empower. Now, also another way of explaining the behavior, I often get asked, how do I explain that particular behavior was sort of not good, you know, without saying, well, you know, mummy or daddy was wrong, or they just can't think straight. On my website, I have a list of phrases to explain that. And the common theme or the common sentence that you just kind of change a bit is mummy or daddy's brain doesn't think that way. So, which is kind of true, because it doesn't, but it doesn't blame them. It doesn't say that they're bad or wrong. It just identifies that, yeah, well, you know, for instance, if you were to say, oh, mummy or daddy lies, they lie, like they keep lying about this, and they promise to do this and then they don't. Well, why do they do that? So, well, mummy or daddy's brain doesn't think that not telling the truth is not right. You know, mummy or daddy's brain just thinks that that's okay. In our home, we don't do that. And that's the you know, what I would like us to kind of be in our home, and those are our rules in our home. But mummy or daddy's brain just thinks differently, and they don't think that there's a problem with that. There's nothing disparaging in that. It's just almost quite factual, but it gives them an understanding without them going, oh, that parent is bad. It's just like, oh, okay, so your brain just thinks differently.
No, I think that's a really helpful way of looking at it. So
really
hopefully
that it's so hard, and I know that, and you know that I'll be the first one to admit this. Sometimes you just want to go blah, because they're shit, because they're annoying, because they're awful. But it's so hard. And actually, one of the countries that take even disclosing or using the word narcissism with your child as classic parental alienation, you could risk losing your children, is America. They are so hot on that. So you've got to be so careful about the wording that you're using there. But using a different type of format is something that my clients have found really, really helpful.
No, perfect, thank you. This question then is kind of follows on, is similar in a lot of ways. So how do we let a narcissistic parent maintain a relationship with their kids without it damaging or affecting their personalities and boundaries? Yeah,
so again, the same as kind of I said, it's about teaching them boundaries, but you can't teach them boundaries if you don't have boundaries yourself. And you have to be really, really strong with your boundaries with the narcissist. So something else that I sort of notice with clients is they sort of say, oh, I don't understand why, you know, they could be talking about their child, you know, whatever age. More often we're sort of, you know, 8, 9, 10 moving onwards. I don't understand why he or she just doesn't say to their mum or dad, look, you know, I don't like this, you're upsetting me, or I don't want to see you, or if you do that again, I'm not coming to, you know, whatever, just sort of defend themselves. And then I say to them, do you do it? And did you do that before? And they kind of then go, oh yeah, no. So the point is if you're not demonstrating a boundary, why would that child demonstrate a boundary? Children learn not by what we say as much as we think that's what they do. They don't. They copy our behavior. Yeah, they always copy their behavior. They see what you do. And if you're able to demonstrate boundaries, not just with the narcissistic ex, but in your life generally, whether it be work or friends or even with them, even with your own children, by demonstrating them a boundary with a consequence is the other thing that you need. So having a boundary, going, oh yeah, I don't like that, but still allowing it to happen means you don't have a boundary. Your boundary has to have not only a consequence, which is if this happens, this is the consequence, but it's something that you have to follow through with. And I'm guilty of this with my own children sometimes. If you do that, I'm going to do this. Great, I've got a consequence, but do I implement it sometimes? Guilty, not really. So, but with the narcissist that you do, and your consequence has to be something realistic. Don't call their bluff. Don't play that game with them. They will play it right back. And when it comes to game playing, they will win. So don't enter that arena. Yeah. So have the boundary, demonstrate to your children what a healthy boundary is, that there's a consequence, and what happens that you do follow through with that consequence. And again, empowering them, it comes back to the same thing, being that listening ear, allowing them to vocalize what is going on for them. And it is such a difficult fine balance between, as I said right at the beginning of this, allowing them to have contact and love that parent, even though the narcissistic parent doesn't love in the same way as non-narcissistic parents love. But that child will love that parent. It's natural, you can't stop it. You might not like the parent, but you still love the parent. And allowing them to love that parent, understand the boundaries, but have someone to talk to about that. Yeah, it's hard. Imagine how difficult it is. You know, that's the parent they've got to grow up with. You know, it's like yeah, mum and dad is kind of fine, but well, as long as they come first, or they're a bit selfish. And that's so emotionally difficult to get their heads round, especially, and at the time when they get their heads around it, they're in their teenage years and they've got enough going on with hormones and everything else. So being there and having those outlets and giving them that sort of empowerment is the key thing. I can see the chat.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions that have come in there. So there's one that says, who's to say the narcissist's lack of boundaries and damaged ego won't rub off on the child? Okay,
there are two questions here that I absolutely love that I have to get into. Oh my God, wonderful. Thank you for asking them. First one, do narcissists ever change? No. High level. So I think the thing that people need to understand here is, so narcissists aren't born. Yeah, it's not genetic. It's, as I said from the beginning, it's either because they've had a very strong narcissistic influence in their family, that they believe that that behavior is the right way to be. They don't know any other way, which is why when you say that's wrong, they go, what? What are you talking about? What do you mean? This is normal. This is how I grew up. This is how you do things. You're not okay. Or that traumatic event. There are some reports that with some form of deep counselling, they may improve their behaviour or show slight awareness, but it's very limited reports. And the reason it is because that requires the narcissist to be self-reflective. That's one thing they can't do. A narcissist actually detaches from their self. They grow up in probably a situation of shame or a traumatic event having happened, so they don't like themselves. They develop this new persona. And because they've developed this new persona, they never self-reflect on who they genuinely are. So that ability to kind of go, oh, do you think I need help? Is not true. And even if they say to you, let's go to counselling, they don't actually mean it. So it's a deeply entrenched personality disorder that it's who they are. And when you ask, do narcissists ever change? That means we haven't quite understood that it is who they are, in the same way that you are who you are. You might be able to change your diet or try and be a bit softer in certain situations, but you can't change who fundamentally you are on the inside. So no, the answer to that is no. Who's to say that the narcissist's lack of boundaries and damaged ego won't rub off on the child? Absolutely, absolutely. I hear you, which is why I said at the beginning, what causes narcissistic adults? A childhood trauma, or having had a relationship with a narcissist in your childhood. And exactly that. And, you know, all the clients that I speak to, and me as a parent also, I can tell you now, my son is 13, and if he does something slightly selfish, I'm like, oh my God, you know, is this lack of empathy? Is he growing up? And I'm on it. Whilst also realizing, if you didn't know, that all teenagers from the age of 13 all the way to about 17, 18 have no empathy. So bear that in mind. Don't diagnose your child or your teen. They're just being teenagers, which means they're selfish. They have no empathy. They don't take responsibility. Or the classic signs of narcissism, but they're not narcissistic. But that isn't to say it could happen. Absolutely it could, which is why I always say, if you meet their emotional needs as the other parent, you're reducing that risk of happening. If you empower them, if you give them the voice, you're reducing the risk of it happening. I hope that answered those questions. Thank you for those.
Yeah, I thought you'd like the do narcissists ever change question.
Literally, I love what I do. Honestly, it's one of the kind of top questions. And also another top question that comes is, do narcissists love their children? That's always a hot topic.
I've had one message to me privately that I'll read out to you. So it says, does it ever get easier? I'm only 2 years on from our home, and I know it's the reeling in and out that I find exhausting. I never know where I am with my ex. My little boy is almost 4 now, and he comes home after overnight saying stuff like he doesn't live with me, he doesn't like his clothes here, he doesn't like his toys here, and he doesn't like other members of the family. He's fine after a few hours, but it's so hard to see him being swayed each time. If I try and talk to my ex, he denies it. How do you manage this?
Does it get easier over time? I think what we need to think about is, does it get easier for the child over time? And this is when we have to understand transition. That is a classic transition tale. And look, I hear you, and it's painful, isn't it? When they come through the door and they just shout out negative stuff. I get it, and I'm 10 years in. I get, oh, God, you're rules, you're doing the rules again. Oh God, it was so much nicer with daddy. I get all of that, okay? The reason it's easier is because I understand the notion of transition. And if you try and put yourself in the child's position, so you know how we all go on holiday and it kind of takes us some time to get used to the bed and where we are and find your way. That's what it's like for that child if they go every other weekend. It's mentally exhausting, especially if you're parallel parenting. Whole different set of rules. Mum's house, we do this. Dad's house, we do that. Can get away with this here. That's been great for the weekend. Can't get away with it at mum's. Oh God, I need to remember that. And just that moving, and also that internal unfairness that a child will always feel, which is, why do I have to move from one house to another? Everybody else gets to stay in the same house with both parents. And what you get when they come back with all that, don't like my toys, don't like my clothes, don't like anything, is anger. It's anger that they feel that they can expose to you because you probably are the most trusted parent, possibly. And if they're more horrible to you than they are to the other parent, if they are harder on you than they are more so on the other parent, it's because they are true with you. Hold on to that. It's beautifully valuable. And it demonstrates that they are able to talk to you. And just the mere fact that you said, I get that sort of child back a couple of days later. Again, classic transition. I feel exactly the same way. It takes a good 48 hours. I always talk about how I almost feel like you need to wash them in a washing machine and then get them all kind of normal again. And they're like, right, you're back into my way. And then we're fine for a week. And then the next week I'm like, oh God, you're going to go back again. And then I'm going to be stuck again. And it's exhausting. Tips for transition to make it easier for you. So when your child comes in and says, oh, I hate this, hate that, just sort of go, okay. It triggers us in here when they say that. We get all angry and upset, and it's all about, oh, why me? Don't take it personally. Think about what it's like for them, and you're then able to slightly remove yourself from being triggered. Understand why you're being triggered. You think it's unfair. You do all the work, and here they are slating you, telling you that you're rubbish. But if you just change your perspective a little bit and think about what it's like for them, right, this is just you finding it really hard. I'm not going to take it personally. I might get used to it, or I might not. I still might find it quite hard. I get triggered still sometimes, and I have to kind of button my lip not to say anything. And sometimes I get it wrong. My 10-year-old goes, don't you tell your clients not to do this, not to ask questions? It'd be really annoying when we come back. So, you're never going to get it 100% right, because we're human and we're not infallible. But try and just change your perspective and realize that the narcissist doesn't have that power over you. You're giving them that power. Just be there for your child and just go, okay, darling, that's fine. And don't ask them too many questions. And if they want to go on tech, or if they want to run in the garden or do something that maybe isn't within the rules for that particular day when they come back, just let them do it. Just let them resettle is probably the key there. Sorry, I over-embellished that answer, but that's a really passionate one also, because it is one that a lot of people going to go through. It's exhausting, that toing and froing, really, really exhausting. Especially in the summer when they go away for really long periods of time. They come back and you're like, oh, you smell different. You smell, you've grown and all of that. So yeah, totally hear you.
Yeah, I guess there must be, whereas, term time is more of a natural structure anyway, whereas in the summer, they might go away for a week or 2 weeks where they wouldn't normally do that when schools are off.
And it gives sort of that narcissistic parent more time to kind of have imposed whatever, my children come back with a totally different vocabulary and I'm like, what? And you try not kind of go, what's that? You kind of go, okay, just I'll give it some time, and it dissolves. It really does kind of disappear. And then you find that everybody readjusts. Don't rush it. Just realize it's coming and just get used to the pattern.
No, brilliant. Thank you. And I hope that answered your question to the person that messaged that to me. I've got one more question that's come from the app, which I know you touched on earlier, because I think someone asked in the chat here. But someone has said, is there a connection with addiction and narcissism? I'm dealing with both at the moment.
Yes, quick answer is yes. You will find that narcissists use forms of addiction in order to deal with various aspects. So a lot of them, for instance, are either alcoholics or drug or substance abuse addiction. And that is around the notion of, not quite wanting to look within, again, as I said, that looking within, that mirror is so frightening. So they use forms of addiction so that they don't do it. So everything's really always quite happy. You're on, you also find, you might find this, that narcissists are always very busy. Yeah, never sit and relax, always moving around. And again, that's very much around the notion of they don't want to sit and think. Also, sex addiction is a big one. Gambling is another. So yes, there is a direct and very strong correlation between narcissism and addiction. And a lot of my clients sort of, when we talk about that, just go, yeah, my God, there was this. Particularly with sex addiction, again, there's a great blog on my website about that, and how the narcissist sort of uses sex to undermine you, but actually it's all about their own personal sex addiction, but they cotton on something obsessive. They can be quite obsessive about something because it gives them a notion of supply as well, and numbs the pain. The drug abuse and the alcohol abuse is about numbing that ability to kind of even think, because they hate themselves deep within. And this is the key thing about narcissism. And believe it or not, you will at some stage get to a point where you actually kind of feel sorry for them. They loathe themselves. They are full of self-hate, very, very low self-esteem, which actually narcissism is a personality disorder that we should pity, actually, or feel sorry for them. To a certain degree, almost want to help, but we are so caught up in the awful manner in which they treat us, treat our children, and the lengths that they go to want to destroy our lives, that it's a very hard correlation. There's so many schools of thought out there about, forgiveness and understanding. And yes, absolutely, you should definitely have a perception of what narcissism is about, but asking you to forgive them is a whole other different conversation. And it's more about learning how to manage it within your life is more about that. Yeah. Big topic, huge topic that I won't go into now, but big topic.
I know, well, this whole thing, like narcissism, isn't it? There's a huge topic. All these questions are so top level, and you could delve so deep into everything.
Oh, so deep, and there are elements I wanted to talk about tonight. It just hasn't come up, but maybe we can do this another time. Is about, how do I move on from that sort of narcissist? And what I wanted to talk about was sort of positive psychology and, post-traumatic growth, and being able to understand that the thing that you went through, this trauma that you have experienced, and then you are not the trauma. It's just something that's happened within your body because of what you've experienced. Actually, you grow as a person, and understanding that having overcome that develops you. And if we just change again our psychology and thinking of it in a positive light helps us. And I also want to talk about, and I spoke about this on my stories, if you follow me on Instagram, about there's an acronym called PERMA, PERMAH, and that's all about our sort of well-being after we've gone through some sort of post-traumatic stress disorder or post-traumatic narcissistic stress disorder, and that's about making sure that we have positive emotion in our lives, engagement, some relationships, that we have meaning and achievement. And they've just added on the H recently. That's all about our health, making sure that we're healthy and we're doing all these things. And these are sort of like pillars to maintain our growth within us, because to overcome the difficulties that we have in maintaining our ability to manage that particular narcissist in our life. And when you empower yourself that way, empower being the key word of the night, you will see that they are just this thing, that they don't have that much power, and you're able to sort of park them almost and continue with your life. Again, huge topic.
No, thank you. I think so. That's all the questions that we've had. So thank you everyone for your questions. And we have been asked in the chat, will we look at doing another Zoom focusing on the positives of moving on from this, please?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I've just spoken about, isn't it? It's positive psychology, having those pillars. I mean, absolutely, we can do another Zoom on that. And it's about changing our mindset. And this is the bit that we kind of really need to get by understanding the notion of what narcissism is, but not just all that it's a really bad thing, but how it was caused and what it's like for them. You then realize that they're not as powerful. We then are able to understand our own experiences, and we have to look within as well. We have to be able to raise our hands up and say, okay, what attracted me to this narcissist? Is there an element of codependency there? Am I a people pleaser? Do I not have boundaries? What went on in my own life? And being able to look deep within that. And that's part of moving on, by the way. You can't move on without you yourself self-reflecting. You have to look at your own actions. And then seeing this event, this thing that happened to us, as something that allows us to grow, to move on. And what do we need to maintain in our life, which is the PERMA, to keep on growing. Because this isn't to say you're not going to meet another narcissist. And what I'm trying to do with my clients is prevent that again, or help you identify if you were to lean towards that again, because you've gone, hold on a second, I recognize this. Because the reason you sort of got involved with this narcissist is that it wasn't your conscious brain. It's not your brain here going, oh yeah, no, I'm doing this narcissist. It's not. It's your subconscious, all happening back here, which is linked to your childhood, your past experiences, your memories. And it's about rewiring that. It's quite a big thing. And so, yes, that sounds like another Q&A to me.
Yes, definitely. We will get something set up and get a date in the diary. But no, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for all of your questions. And thank you, Nawal. You've been so helpful, as always, given fantastic.
You are very, very welcome. Thank you very much, everybody. As I said, go to my website, www.yourdivorcecoach.org.uk. I have narcissistic survivor groups. There's about 500. There's a women and men only group. Don't mix. You can feel safe, where loads of women and men, separate groups, share their stories. You can get support there. I pop in there as well from time to time, giving some sort of helpful advice, and Instagram daily content, or just reach out if you want to work with me. I offer free 15-minute discovery calls if you want to sort of help on a particular issue or get some coaching in. But thank you very much, everybody, for sharing your evening with me. I hope you found my answers and information useful to you.